Next, AI Safety Summit. Yes, those two letters are everywhere. But do you at home know what AI actually is, what it means, and what it could do? I bet there's a lot that don't. Tonight, we will try to explain all of that. And I do an interview with Senator Jacinta Price. She's the Australian that led the recent successful No campaign in their referendum. And I'll tell you what, she's going to be a big force in Australian politics in the years to come. But before all of that, let's get the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nigel, thank you very much and good evening. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The Foreign Office has confirmed the first British nationals have left Gaza via the Rafah border crossing from Gaza into Egypt. The Foreign Secretary James Cleverly called the crossing a hugely important first step. Well, earlier, buses carrying at least 320 foreign passport holders set off from Gaza, the first in an initial list of 500 people allowed out of the enclave. It comes as more than 80 injured people were taken across the Rafah crossing in ambulances under a deal mediated by Qatar. The Israeli military says 15 of its soldiers have been killed during heavy fighting in its ground offensive into Gaza. That as another airstrike hit the Jabalia refugee camp in the north. Rescue efforts were underway this afternoon as paramedics dug through the rubble in a desperate search for survivors. The IDF says an airstrike yesterday killed a senior Hamas commander who was a ringleader of the attack on the 7th of October. Police are searching for two men in the West Midlands after several incidents of mice being thrown into McDonald's restaurants. They've released images of 32-year-old Amir Khan and 30-year-old Bilal Hussain as part of a public appeal. Footage shared on social media showed dozens of mice unleashed in another of the chains after two incidents earlier this week. Pro-Palestinian activists have reportedly called for protests against McDonald's after a restaurant in Israel donated meals to Israeli soldiers and security workers. The US Vice President has been at Downing Street this evening as several high-profile guests attend the world's first summit on AI safety at Bletchley Park. She was greeted by the Prime Minister, who hopes to put the UK at the centre of global efforts to monitor the technology. They will this evening be holding a private dinner. Earlier, Kamala Harris announced the creation of the US AI Safety Institute, which will work alongside its UK counterpart. She said the threats posed by new technologies are profound. A former top civil servant says former Health Secretary Matt Hancock displayed nuclear levels of overconfidence in the early days of the pandemic. Helen McNamara was Deputy Cabinet Secretary in 2020 and 2021. She played a key role in Britain's COVID response. She told the inquiry that rules were routinely broken in the daily course of government. And finally, the King has called for action, partnership and commitment to combat environmental challenges as his state visit to Kenya continues. The King told the United Nations in Nairobi he's seen the effects of climate change firsthand before planting a tree to commemorate his visit. His Majesty then joined Queen Camilla on a visit to an elephant orphanage where the Queen fed a calf. The monarch also visited an urban forest to highlight the importance of green spaces in our cities. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio, and now on your smart speaker by simply saying play GB News. Now it's back to Nigel.
Good evening. Last night, about an hour before we went to air, there was a sit-in that took place at Liverpool Street Station. Many reports that disabled people and others were completely unable to catch their trains, but there they were with their Palestine flags and, of course, the chanting. This was in Liverpool Street Station last night. There we are. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which means the obliteration of Israel. But that's OK. That's all right. you can do that. Or, repeatedly, on Saturday after Saturday, this is the chant that is heard in London and some other of our major cities. Well, it hasn't. Well, there you are. Jihad. You can stand up in the street and call for jihad, otherwise known really to most of us as some sort of form of holy war. But that's okay. You won't get arrested for shouting out jihad. And yet, last night, a couple of hours after the Liverpool Street sit-in, just down the road in Bethnal Green, an extraordinary incident happened. Now, this resident of Bethnal Green, who is a man with a Scottish accent, clearly going with the Christian name of John, and we don't know any more about him than that. But a few days earlier, he'd walked down Bethnal Green High Street and made this video.
Just come along Bethnal Green Road this morning, and this is the kind of that's going on. Yeah. So there's a look at this. Yeah, you see it? And then over here at this one, we've got this crap going on as well. Yeah. And then we come along to this pole here, and they've then done the same crap here as well. Look at this. Look. See this? This is what we're dealing with. This is no on, and then up in this one here, you see that? Yeah. Same here as well. This is what we're dealing with. And these over here on the shop, look at this shop, this one. On the shop, Ghana, Turkish restaurant. Yeah, look at this. Look. This is the kind of crap that we're dealing with. This is the kind of nonsense. Yeah. Yeah. This is the kind of nonsense we're dealing with in Bethnal Green. You let them into the country and this come up with.
Now, clearly, John was not a happy bunny. He did not like to see all those Palestinian flags on lampposts and outside shops in Bethnal Green High Street. He expressed a view, and he did it in a way with bad language that we won't approve of, but he expressed a view that I suspect is currently held by a huge number of people. What the hell is going on in our country? Well, last night, a couple of hours after the Liverpool Street sit-in had finished, this is what happened outside his flat in Bethnal Green.
No. And to protect a vulnerable person, by means of bail conditions imposed, you do not attend any events involved with Palestine, OK? The reasons why we did this is on the 17th of the 10th of 2023, on Bethnal Green Road at 10:04, you were witnesses saying, obviously, people, why are they over here, etc., we let them into our country, etc.
So, big deal.
Yeah.
Take him. Disgusting. He's a disgusting. Absolute. I'm a stage 4 cancer patient and I need to care. Make a scene of shoes. The shoes is making a scene. You're arresting him because he said something in the street. But Hamas, a terrorist organisation.
You haven't been round the block. You don't know what you're talking about. John, have a close feeling. Did you hear that?
What?
All those Palestinian flags in Bethnal Green Road, and they discussed it, absolutely discussed that.
Look at the cops. Look at all the cops.
Embarrassing.
Embarrassing. Because he mentioned Palestine.
Let me repeat the reason for John's arrest. Quite simply, what the policeman said. On Bethnal Green Road at 10:04 a.m, you were witnessed as saying, "Why are they over here, etc.? We let them into our country, etc." That's why he's been arrested, and believe it or not, he's still being detained. No charges have been brought. He's still being detained. We don't know this man's identity. We don't know whether there are other past criminal records that he might have. We don't know any of this. But on the basis of what the police officer said, he has been arrested for saying, "Why are they over here? We let them into our country." I would suggest if people, particularly at this moment in time, when a lot of us are scratching our heads about what's going on, were to be arrested for saying that, I'm not sure how many arrests the police would have to make. 10 million? 20 million? 30 million? I don't know. What this man has said surely cannot be seen to be breaking the law or to be criminal. It's a point of view and said in a way that many may disapprove of. They might not like his tone, but to be arrested for that, whilst you can take over Liverpool Street Station and shout from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free, or shout jihad in our streets, something, folks, is going very, very badly wrong. I always try to be pro-police on this programme. I do. I get viewers' complaints that I'm being too pro-police. But when you see what's going on here, I want to ask you, I mean, are you angry at the police over this? Because I've got to tell you, tonight I really am. Welcome your thoughts, farage@gbnews.com. No doubt, between now and tomorrow, we will find out more about this case. But on the face of it, this looks very, very wrong indeed. Now, let's get to Tel Aviv and join Mark White, GB News' security editor, who is there. And Mark, I thought this morning, quite a significant moment when one of the leaders of Hamas gave an interview.
Yes, this was Ghazi Hamad, who was giving a television interview and quite boldly saying that he would and Hamas would continue to attack Israel. There would be more in the way of October 7th type of attacks, blaming Israel for all the wrongs that the Palestinian people have suffered and saying that there can be no peace for the Palestinian people without the destruction of Israel. So we heard it from his own words, a senior Palestinian leader there, clearly not looking for any kind of ceasefire with Israel, but determined to continue that struggle, that fight, that terrorism that we saw on October the 7th. So given that, Israel will argue that they have no choice but to continue to prosecute the war, to go in and to destroy Hamas. And in terms of that war, Nigel, it is very bloody indeed. Fierce fighting right throughout North Gaza. Today, we got word of a 16th Israeli soldier who had been killed during the fighting. There's all the controversy, of course, about the Jabalia refugee camp in North Gaza, which was struck yesterday by missiles, an airstrike that was called in by troops on the ground to take out a Hamas commander and also Hamas infrastructure, including tunnels and weapons storage in that area. They are absolutely, the Israelis, adamant that that was a legitimate military target, but because, of course, Hamas has this process of hiding in and amongst the civilian population, then there is always significant civilian casualties.
No, you're right, and certainly back to the first point, when a senior Hamas official says we'll go on attacking again and again until Israel is annihilated, I would suggest, says to people who think there should be an immediate ceasefire, frankly, there just can't be one. On the war on the ground, the Israeli claim is that they've hit 11,000 Hamas targets, just backing up your point about the intensity of it. Let's just switch to Egypt, if we can, for a moment. As I understand it, in the last couple of hours, some British citizens have been allowed to cross the border at Rafah. But a very interesting point that may push back on debate in this country is the Egyptian Prime Minister saying that basically we're prepared to sacrifice millions of lives to ensure that no one encroaches upon our territory. Very tough words, Mark White.
Yes, I mean, it doesn't relate as much to the Israeli military as to the thought that the Israeli military is about to force 2.3 million Palestinians out of Gaza and into the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. Israel will not stand for that. Egypt, I should say, says they will not stand for that. And of course, interestingly, Keir Starmer in his speech yesterday spoke about this very issue, about the concerns that Palestinians have about forced displacement. And he called in his speech for the Israeli government to disavow the Palestinian people of any such notion that they would be pushed out of Gaza and into Egypt, that once the fighting was over, that they would be allowed to return to their homes in Gaza. I don't think as yet Israel has made that clear. No, I think you're right. There is some ambiguity around it, but certainly none coming from
from the Egyptian Prime Minister. And what about, just finally, if I may, the situation on the ground in Israel itself today, in particular, rockets coming in from 3 potential sources?
Yeah, we only had 2 rocket attacks over Tel Aviv today, and we went to the shelter once as it was in our area. But, you know, it's pretty much every hour that there are rocket attacks going into Israel. A lot of the attacks are aimed at the communities around the Gaza border and really at the IDF troops who are mustering on the Gaza border, but also they're going further afield into Ashkelon and Ashdod, north of Gaza as well. They've still got the capability. The job is not done by any means, and Israel knows that that job on the ground is going to be very long and very bloody. 16 soldiers dead already, and they've only begun pushing into these northern suburbs of Gaza. Once they get into Gaza City proper, and once, of course, they have to get down into the tunnel systems, I think the number of Israeli casualties is going to grow very significantly.
I'm sure that's right. Mark White from Tel Aviv, as ever, thank you very much for that live report. So it's the big AI summit. Yes, it's Rishi Sunak's attempt to bring the world leaders together, and indeed, you know, Elon Musk has come and the American Vice President has come, and there's some pretty important people there at the AI Safety Summit. We keep hearing about AI, reading about AI, but what actually is it? Well, if you're completely up to speed, then perhaps you think I'm talking down to you. But I'll bet you there's a lot of people watching and listening to this who don't really fully understand it and what opportunities and threats it genuinely poses. We'll do our best in a moment to tell you.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
This time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So are you upset by the police's double standards in the way that I am? Well, one or two of your responses that have come in. John says it's disgraceful. While they stand there and watch them climbing statues around Whitehall and calling for God knows what, the police are a disgrace. David says this is outrageous. The police are a total shambles. This is what I feared. Stephen says, I don't suppose the individual officers wanted to arrest John. I imagine most of them agree. And that's the worry, isn't it? We need an effective police force that has the full consent of the people to maintain civility in this country. And I just sense in the last couple of weeks they're starting to lose a lot of support because people feel they're acting on a double standard. So what is AI? Well, earlier on, we sent out our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, onto the streets of Lincoln to ask people if they knew what AI was.
What is AI? Well, so far we haven't actually got artificial intelligence. AI stands for artificial intelligence, but so far we basically have really clever learning machines. So years ago we would have had something like Cleverbot, which learns from all the responses that people put into it. And that's basically a more advanced version of what we have right now.
Extension of your brain, going to be better than what the humans can do. Can be frightening.
I think it does have some benefits, but mostly I think people are fearful of the implications.
You know, the Terminator film, it can either take over the world or it's a good thing.
I guess AI ranges from simple things like automated response or predictive text to making decisions on behalf of people, all the way through to fakes of people, imitations.
And basically it's a program which learns about human behaviour and characteristics.
Now, it's interesting because the people that actually wanted to answer that question, Lincoln, had some knowledge of it. But I bet a lot of you out there right now don't know much about it, really, which is why we're very pleased to have Professor Hanny Hagras, Professor of Artificial Intelligence and Head of AI Research Group at the University of Essex. Right, we are not university-level mathematics or physics students. Assume we are just ordinary folk, and we keep hearing about AI. What is it?
AI is a set of computer programs and algorithms that try to aim to give the machine or a computer the ability to have human or nature-inspired intelligence.
A machine with human intelligence. It sounds truly horrifying.
It is, and it's not. It is because of the opportunities and financial benefits it can give to humanity and the ability for us to get huge breakthroughs in medicine.
But the human brain, however hard it tries, doesn't always deal with things logically, does it? So because the human brain is making other emotional value judgments with everything that it does. That's part of being human.
Yeah.
So how can a machine have emotional intelligence?
We are not looking for emotions.
We're not looking for that.
We are not looking for emotions.
So what are we looking for? Are we looking for pure logic?
We are looking for enabling the machine to do tasks which require our own intelligence. For example, when I speak to you, I understand what you say and I can respond to you. I can begin having a conversation with you. When I see you, I know that this is Nigel Farage. Okay. When I see certain, if I'm a medical doctor and I see a certain CT scan, I know what it is doing. So it's trying to analyze different inputs and try to take the correct outputs to deal with them. We're not speaking about emotions, we're trying to get the job done.
All right, so we can go on to ChatGPT and we can ask it to give us an opinion. It does give opinions, you see. It's very because if you put in, give us an opinion on Joe Biden, give us an opinion on Donald Trump, we get very different answers. So are these... I mean, what I'm saying to you is this. That, OK, it can think like a human, but isn't the danger that it thinks like the human that's programmed it and given it the information?
OK, so artificial intelligence have got different kind of flavors. So there is what we call opaque box models, which is a breed that have generated ChatGPT, which has been trained in a huge amount of computing and huge amount of data to give us outputs. These are very complex. even the person that programmed them doesn't understand exactly how they work. And this can be very dangerous if you begin relying on them, for example, to do very sophisticated tasks in our lives.
So we can create something
that
effectively has a mind of its own.
Yes, and this is why here in the UK, in the AI Select Committee, in the House of Lords, they have made a very good recommendation, which I hope that the current summit is going to adopt.
Yeah, I mean, Rishi Sunak's got this summit to talk about threats, but let's go back to you mentioned opportunities, financial benefits. Just tell me what you think the big benefits could be.
Well, let's pick numbers. So there are estimates that generative AI, which is a branch of ChatGPT, is going to generate annually between $2.3 to $4.6 trillion per year. Just for comparison, the GDP of the UK is about $3.3 trillion.
And is that because it makes us more efficient?
It creates new opportunities, new services, and it enables us to create efficiency while getting us to do more tasks and generate more opportunities and financial benefits where the opportunity arises.
Well, OK. But Rishi Sunak has called this summit, and he's trying to take a bit of global leadership on this issue because of the threats. And we've heard all sorts of blood-curdling stories that this thing could become a total monster, completely out of control, could threaten the future of humanity. And we look on and say, well, we just don't really understand what this means. How big a threat is this, or could it be?
It is a huge threat. To be blunt about it, because if safeguards and legislations are not going to be in place. AI is an industrial revolution. When electricity was invented, it came up with safeguards. You didn't have uninsulated wires all over the place. The problem of AI, it is unlike the other industrial revolution. The technology is here, and now we are trying to find how to contain it. And this is why such a summits and such legislations are very important for us.
What's the worst case scenario then?
It's what you have. You can think it out. You can think it out. The problem that you have got this kind of huge machine trying to understand your own intentions, and if it gets out of control, it can basically begin getting out of power. This is happening nowadays. Didn't you have a conversation with some friend and suddenly you find that an advert is appearing in your social media?
Yes. Yes. Oh, horrifying. Yeah, no. Yeah.
This is
so it's happening already. Yeah, it's happening already.
Small part.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously. So let's say that Rishi kicks off a global process where governments of all shades get together and say, right, we've got to actually agree, to use your analogy, to put some, safety on the electricity wires. But what's to stop a bad actor getting involved in this space and causing problems for everybody else?
Well, it is like any other technology. Basically, you can assume that bad actors can always appear. But if you have got the correct legislations that, like nuclear power, any kind of bad actors can appear. But because there are very tight regulations how it is going to be used, how it is deployed, it is safe.
Actually, I think, comparing this debate to the nuclear debate is quite relevant because we saw in 1945 the devastating impact of nuclear weapons. And, many people for decades after that lived in terrible fear. And a lot of people thought, well, let's just uninvent it. Let's just not have nuclear weapons. But you can't uninvent things. And I guess there is quite a good modern-day example.
Nuclear weapons is one thing, but nuclear energy
could be very positive.
Is very positive.
Yeah, we could argue the same then. In your logic, we could argue the same about AI. Harnessed correctly, it can be a good
AI
thing.
is a fantastic opportunity for humanity. It can really solve a lot of diseases, can cure cancer, it can enable us to have fantastic health care and social care. What we are speaking about is what the House of Lords mentioned. If AI is going to be deployed in our society, it has to be totally explainable. It should be easy to interpret, analyze, and be under the human control. If you understand it, you'll trust it.
OK, it's there. It's not going away. Opportunities, threats, as with everything in life that's new. But, and here's the really important question, I think, from a UK perspective. There you are, at Essex University. Where are we as a country in terms of knowledge, education engineers. Are we as a country making a play for this or being left behind?
No, UK is the world leader in this kind of area.
Is it really?
Yep, and the business opportunities we have got in the country for AI in general is growing, and the government is putting a huge amount of funding and support. And there is a lot of startups which are leading the way worldwide.
I'm surprised, because I would have thought with tech, we always think West Coast of America, giant global corporations.
AI is different, because AI, you just need to have a solid academic base and the ability for this to be converting this to software. Software industry is easier, and I think the UK has been always at the forefront of this.
Really interesting. Well, I have to say, Professor Hagras, thank you for coming in and giving us... And I think, folks, that was a really quite cool, logical explanation of what it is, what good it can do, and what potential harm it can do also. But I was actually, I've got to say, at the end there, rather cheered up to hear that at least we're world leader in something. And that's really rather important. In a moment, I'm going to introduce you to an Australian senator who led the No campaign in the recent referendum. Yep, and I sat down with Jacinta Price. Got to tell you, she is massively impressive. She's got a big future in Australian politics. All of that in just a moment.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows...
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Three weeks ago in Australia, there was a national referendum. It was called The Voice. It was brought in by the Labour Prime Minister, Albanese. And the idea was that Aboriginals and Torres Straits communities would have their own separate voice on any legislation that was being put before the Australian Parliament. This all part of Australia's guilt trip about its history. And it seemed that it would pass, because after all, anything you do in the name of increasing rights, anything you do in the name of diversity, surely must be a very good thing. The fact that it meant actually a form of segregation, of dividing out and of giving certain racial groups in Australia more rights than everybody else. And remember, actually, in percentage terms, those of an Aboriginal background are well represented in the Australian Parliament already. But the great and the good came out in favour. Qantas, the airline, had vote yes all over their aeroplanes. The big banks, well, of course, they came out in favour of yes. Other big corporations, big media organisations, newspapers, all saying vote yes. It seemed at one point, very early on, before the referendum was really in full swing, that yes was going to get 65 to 75% of the vote. And then people started to hear the arguments. People started to hear the logic. People started to hear how, frankly, dangerous it is to treat the citizens of one country differently, to segregate them in terms of their rights on the basis of their race. But there was one absolute superstar in this referendum, and she came out of nowhere. Very recently elected to the Australian Senate. She comes from the Northern Territories. Her mother was an Aborigine. And she really came, genuinely Aborigine, not modernised in any sense at all. And Senator Jacinta Price just set this whole debate on fire. I was very pleased to be able to meet her earlier on this afternoon. Here she is, Senator Jacinta Price. Suddenly, Australia has a referendum, and the issue may be different, but the dividing lines were the same. This was a little bit like the Brexit campaign, wasn't it? Because anyone that dared to support the No campaign were called nasty names, they were racist, they were all of these things. But you suddenly found yourself, and it was really your maiden speech, wasn't it, in the Senate? And in the Senate, there in perhaps not particularly friendly territory of Canberra. That was really the beginning of you as a national figure in Australia, wasn't it?
Yes, I think so. This concept that, well, the corporates know better than the rest of Australia. Australians in general don't like to be told how to vote, how to think, and all of those sorts of things. But also, the virtue signalling does nothing for anybody. It doesn't do anything at all. And suggesting that I'm a victim because of my racial heritage is a racial stereotype that I will not allow to continue to be peddled. And so the voice was based on that. The way, the virtuous would stand up and the corporate Australia thought, we know what's best for our poor Indigenous people. Therefore, we are going to pour our resources behind the Yes campaign, was continuing to peddle the victimisation narrative.
Yeah.
And Australians don't want a bar of it.
You give this speech and you go from being somebody who's reasonably well known in in some ways quite remote. I'm not being insulting of the Northern Territories, but let's be frank.
It is remote.
It is very remote in every sense, and you're travelling right across the country to Canberra, and suddenly overnight you're a national figure. Overnight you are seen as one of the leaders, if not the primary voice, in the No campaign. How did you deal with that sort of incredible transformation of your life and the abuse that came with it?
Well, I guess over the years, the abuse was nothing unfamiliar to me. I have spoken out on issues of domestic and family violence and against it, and tried to highlight very real issues in remote communities, and have, received pushback from that. So the abuse was nothing new. It was, while at times exhausting, also an incredible privilege to be able to travel the country, greet audiences across the nation of people who were feeling like they wanted to do the right thing for Indigenous Australians, but felt this wasn't the way to do it, and just needed the encouragement to understand that it was okay to vote no. And I really wanted to ignite a sense of the Australian spirit again within our country, to be proud to call ourselves Australian, because we can't begin to resolve our issues until there is that sense of national pride. And that became more prevalent toward the end of the campaign closer to
It became
the
easier
referendum.
to say it, didn't it?
It did.
Yeah.
And audiences
and you loved every minute of it, didn't you?
Well, I have a life on stage.
You did. Come on.
In a former life, as a singer-songwriter and various other forms of the arts.
You've always been a performer.
I've always been a performer, and so being on before audiences was, about also feeding off the energy of the audience and knowing that Australians were also becoming more emboldened, more encouraged, and that sense of unity was growing. So, that really drove me through to the final stages of the referendum.
Now, the result was emphatic. Decisive, emphatic. It probably means that Albanese dare not have another constitutional referendum on the monarchy or any other question. And maybe at some point in the future Australia debates that, but for now that's gone. I think it's off the table. What does it mean? Because we had our Brexit referendum, the country loved it, Parliament hated it, they tried to frustrate us, we had to win it more than once. In the end, it led to a quite a big political shift.
Yes.
I got a huge amount of support for the Brexit Party. That led on to the Conservatives winning a big election.
Yeah.
What is the likely, if any, in your opinion, impact of this referendum result on the next Australian general election?
Well, I think the Prime Minister has to sit up and take note of what's occurred. And I don't think he has to this point. And I don't think the proponents of the Yes campaign have done so either. They belong to a grievance industry that believe that they are morally right and that they are continuing to try to push their way of doing things on the Australian people. And I think this will, the Australian people will continue to push back on that and want for common sense ways forward.
Well, there she is, Senator Jacinta Price. Tell you what, she's warm, she's logical, she's going to go a long way in Australian politics. And really, that referendum was their Brexit moment. They beat the very same people that Brexiteers beat in this country. And all I can say is jolly well done them. Now, the What the Farage moment. It is that time of the year when Collins Dictionary announce new words that are going into their dictionary. Top of the list, of course, is AI. Much talked about, and I hope, hopefully after earlier, somewhat better understood by this audience. But I'm really quite pleased and proud of something. Because when I said in the summer that I'd been debanked, you are, no one's ever heard of that term. What's he done? Invented a word? Well, I've got to tell you, with some source of pride, that debanking is now in the Collins Dictionary, one of the new words that has been recognised, and they've given it to a very accurate description. So there we are. Debanking is now a mainstream word in the British language. Now, they've done it, of course, to cigarettes, and you've got calories on menus and threats of warnings on bottles of wine. But now there's a campaign. That if we buy packaged meat, there should be health warnings on it. I'm beginning to give up. Why can't they simply leave us all alone? Well, Tam Fry from the National Obesity Forum is coming on in a moment to try and convince me.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, not for the first time, we've got Tam Fry, who's chairman of the National Obesity Forum, on this programme. And the reason is, I think Tam is right to lead this campaign. I think obesity is increasingly becoming an absolutely chronic, desperate problem in society, especially in our youth. And it's going to lead to goodness knows what health consequences down the road. So I'm normally a big supporter and fan of stuff that Tam fights for. But Tam, you know, we've got cigarette packets that started off with warnings, then with graphic pictures, and now sold in plain packaging. We're even assaulted now in restaurants with the number of calories that might be in a dish. I just don't want to know. We're looking at warnings on wine bottles, but I've kind of worked it out. If I drink more than 2 bottles, I'm going to feel pretty rotten in the morning. And now, you know, if I get under the butcher's and I want to buy some bacon and sausages, I might find that it's wrapped up in a package with a graphic description of the silent killer dangers of buying meat. And I kind of get to the point of thinking that, yes, of course, we want the nation to have better health. We're worried about obesity. But maybe we're getting a bit sick of Big Brother telling us what we can and can't do.
Well, I don't see things that way. And I'd debank you if I may. We have warnings about fat, salt and sugar. All 3 of those, either separately or in tandem, engender obesity and then the other diseases which come after obesity. I don't think you're going to see this wrapped up in cellophane with a big warning sign.
You don't?
No. I think it'll be a positive reminder that if you eat too much meat or demand too much meat, you're doing 2 things. First of all, you're putting your health in some danger because there's been a lot of research which goes to show that meat engenders obesity. But also there is the fact of the climate change. And we spend millions of acres and millions of pounds rearing cattle that exude methane gas, and that is doing nobody any good at all. Now, I'm not going to take battle with you because, in a sense, I would hate myself to see wrapping up paper saying this meat will poison you.
So what will we be doing then?
Pardon me?
If we don't do that, how do we get these warnings?
Well, I think there is a subtle warning, if you will, and that is just a card somewhere in the butcher shop or in the supermarket, which says factually, meat is not the best thing for you red meat particularly, and processed meat particularly.
Yeah, interestingly, one of the new terms in the Collins Dictionary is ultra-processed meat, because this gets talked about as well.
Beats debanking.
Yeah, well, it depends. But now, we are told constantly that ultra-processed meat is even worse for us. We're told that cured bacon is really bad for us in excess.
In excess.
In excess. So how do we measure? How do we measure what is a sensible, in your view, a sensible amount of meat or processed meat for people to eat?
Well, I think there's a very simple answer to that, and that is the WHO, the World Health Organization, followed by the Department of Health, says you can eat so much saturated fat, you can eat so much unsaturated fat, and that should be your limit. And both those limits are way, way down from what we're eating at the moment. So simply go on the net, find out exactly in terms of processed meat and in terms of real meat, how much is recommended by the World Health Authority. They've spent a lot of time...
Yeah, well, I mean, there are one or two WHO skeptics around here, but, you know, certainly over the pandemic. I mean, but Tam, I just sort of worry about this. You know, are we going to spend our lives looking at everything we eat and drink and worrying? Or is there not, with people that are brought up through an education system that teaches them properly and sensibly about these things, isn't it really ultimately about people applying common sense?
It's about people applying common sense, and you've touched on education. Education is fundamental to all of this. You do not need, once you've been taught the rudiments of good eating, healthy eating and lifestyle, you don't need it rammed down your throat, because if you do, then people will take the exact opposite and do whatever.
Yeah.
So my view would be what the government should be doing is listening to these Durham scientists, who are very reputable people, and trialing it. Now, there's nothing wrong in trialing it. Just see how it works.
Well, yeah, but whenever government says we're going to put a warning on something, and it's a trial, it always stays forever, doesn't it?
Well, I think that's the problem of government, and I have no time for government. But if you say, right, we're going to have a little trial for 6 months, just like any other medical trial that goes on, and then we're going to review it with a proper body looking at it. If people say, hey, this is a good idea, then the government has got this surety that the public actually approve. If people turn around and throw it away and debank it, the government will say, that's it.
Final thought on this. I know quite a lot of people who live on takeaways because they can't cook.
Correct.
They've never learned to cook. And I know that Lee Anderson...
They've never been taught to cook.
Yeah, Lee Anderson, the MP, made this point about obesity in his constituency up in Nottinghamshire, that a lot of people were eating junk because they didn't know how to cook. Should we teach everyone at school how to cook?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's been written in by Henry Dimbleby, who produced this document for the government, which the government threw away, which is very stupid. But he said there is absolutely no reason, and Jamie Oliver would agree, that when you go to primary school, i.e. you're out of the preschool element, you go to primary school, you have cookery lessons, and you teach yourself how to cook 14 basic dishes before you get to the age of 14. And that will set you up with all the parameters of healthy and unhealthy food, and you're learning it at the right time.
Tell you what, we'll finish up on that strong note of agreement. Tam, thank you very much. Jacob, that made sense at the end. But I do worry, Jacob, about governments putting health warnings and calories on things, and whether we're not going a bit too far with all of this.
I think the health warnings are monstrous, because beef in and of itself is not bad for you, nor is pork, nor is lamb, etc. Eating far too much is bad for you. And so I think it's just dishonest to say that meat is bad for you.
Well, we'll have to see what they come up with. We'll have to see what the formal wording is. And if they do indeed say too much of this, excess of this is bad for you, then we might say, OK. Now, Jacob, you've been with the former Australian Prime Minister, Tony Abbott.
I have a really interesting interview with Tony Abbott. He explains how he managed to deal with illegal migration in Australia when he was Prime Minister. He turned the boats back.
He did.
And he'll be able to explain if we can do the same. And we're also discussing Israel-Palestine, and he's got such experience as a global statesman and understands the problem, and will be sharing his knowledge with us.
Yeah, I thought the statement, the interview with the Hamas leader that we saw this morning, saying, you know, we'll repeat October the 7th again and again and again until we annihilate Israel, I saw even some people who I wouldn't normally agree with politically saying, well, actually, this does show the Israelis have got to do this job, horrible though it is.
They've got no choice.
They've got no choice. Jacob, I have also talked about the police, just very quickly. A growing perception that the police are applying the rules unfairly.
I was very impressed by the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester, who apologised for a mistake. Isn't this refreshing when somebody in high office, particularly in the police, says, look, we got it wrong this time, we won't get it wrong again. And I think the Metropolitan Police could learn from that, because their default is to close ranks and say, we've done nothing wrong, move along, please.
I agree with that. Well, we'll wait and see. Now, don't go and walk your dog early tomorrow morning on the South Coast, because Storm Kieran is on its way.
Hi there, welcome to the Met Office forecast for GB News. This is Aidan McGivern. Storm Kieran won't affect everyone, but in places it will bring spells of rain and disruptive or even damaging and dangerous winds. It's predominantly going to affect northern parts of France into the Channel Islands, southern parts of the UK. The wet and windy weather sweeping in overnight. The heaviest rain affecting Wales and the southwest initially before moving into the rest of England and southern Scotland by the end of the night. The winds strengthening, peaking around southwestern shores during the early hours with a risk of 70 or even 80 plus mile-per-hour gusts. And it's certainly going to be a very blustery start to Thursday. The strongest of the winds transfer along the coast to affect southeastern parts of England into the afternoon. And again, around coastal areas, 80 mile-per-hour wind gusts are a possibility, or even more than that in some of the most exposed parts. Inland, 60 mile-per-hour wind gusts. So the risk of damaging wind gusts in places, dangerous coastal conditions and disruption to transport. But elsewhere across the UK, actually, it's a blustery day. However, the strongest of the winds will be across southern areas. And then into Friday, sunshine and showers for many as Kieran moves through. Again, a gusty day for northeastern parts, but the wet weather easing to showers. And this weekend, we'll see a spell of rain move in across southern parts of the UK, clearing to showers later.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app.